Hello, everyone. This is Justin Kraus. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Tonight's presentation, our topic is going to be on planning for healthcare. We know that healthcare, of course, is a top concern for all retirees, and up to now it has been difficult to calculate the exact cost. Tonight's presentation is striving to show you exactly how you can calculate your personalized healthcare assessment. Now, joining us tonight from Nationwide to go into this topic and explain in detail for us is Carlo Cordasco. Carlo joins us from Nationwide Financial. He joined there in September 2020 with more than 20 years of financial industry experience. As Vice President for Nationwide Retirement Institute, Carlo is dedicated to educating advisors, clients, plan sponsors, and plan participants about the latest in retirement income and planning trends. Carlo is a national speaker and engages in investment professionals as they seek to answer and manage the critical task of retirement income planning. Carlo addresses thousands of financial professionals and their clients each year, from keynote speakers at national broker-dealer conferences and seminar speakers at local client educational events. Now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Carlo and bring Carlo on to begin the presentation. Thank you for joining us tonight, Carlo.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and good evening, everyone. I am excited to have an opportunity to share this with you. As you've just heard, one thing that Nationwide has made a priority is helping you identify healthcare costs as they may relate to you specifically, individually, in retirement. For years, our industry has had great research on the average cost of health care for the average person. But when it comes to financial planning, being able to get your hands around health care costs as they might relate to you personally has become more important, especially today in light of all the health care changes. So allow me to, please, if you will, open up my presentation with two questions. They're rhetorical. I don't need anyone to answer. But in your mind right now, as you envision retirement, how much income do you think you're going to need in retirement? And I bet that most people are going to have a number in mind, whether it's a dollar amount or a percentage of what they are currently earning and projecting that into retirement. Most people have a pretty good feel of the income they're going to need in retirement. It's my second question that usually catches most people off guard, and there are really two answers I get specifically to the second question. My second question relates back to the first one, and that is, what percentage of your retirement income do you think will go towards your health care costs? And the two answers I generally receive are, I'm not sure, or a lot. And both answers are correct because we found that most people, 4 out of 5, underestimate or don't know what their health care costs will be in retirement, and that means those who guess a lot are correct as well. And so as I progress through the slides, the presentation is designed to help provide you with some overviews on health care costs, Medicare, what Medicare covers, and so on. But ultimately, it's designed to help put you in a position of strength to identify your potential health care costs based on 3 specific areas. The actuarial firm, in layman's terms, that crunches our data for you, focuses on 3 things. 1, where do you live? The state you live in will have an impact on your health care costs in retirement because health care costs vary by region. The second thing will be your health history. I ask that question in 2 ways. One is, what does somebody else's health history have to do with your future health care costs? Well, they're part of the average. If we can pull everybody else out and we can focus on your specific health history, then isn't that going to be much more specific when we begin to look at the potential for your future health care costs based on your current health state? And the third thing will be, how much do you earn in retirement? Most people don't realize that while Medicare is a means-based entitlement program, the means-based also impacts what you pay for Medicare at a premium level. So two different parts of Medicare can cost you more if you earn more in retirement. And we'll go through all those details. But a lot of people don't realize that earnings in retirement can have an impact on Medicare costs. So without any more delay, let me work through the slides to address a lot of what I just talked about and to provide you with an overview, again, of Medicare and get into the actual part of the presentation where we show you how we can turn this into a specific tool for you. Now, this slide basically is going to make our attorneys happy and make you happy as well. The good news is I'm not talking about any type of investment product tonight. And if I was, I would encourage you, as always, to do your homework to know a lot about Nationwide before making any decisions along the way. So the agenda for the presentation, 1, we'll take a look at the Retirement Income Challenge. 2, we'll talk about some of the specifics of Medicare, the A's, the B's, the D's, and so on. And then I'll talk about the engine that drives how we can turn this into an action step for you down the road. So what is the Retirement Income Challenge? As you take a look at the slide here, you can see that there are a lot of different decisions that we get to make when it comes to retirement. And primarily, all of these decisions have a lot to do with the income that we're going to take and when we can take it. But there's one on here in particular that is going to provide us with the need to generate income, and that is the fact that when we turn 65, we're becoming eligible for Medicare, and there's a cost to that. And you may be 65 today, you may be retired today. The bottom line is there's always something you can do about it. Ideally, the sooner we start, the better, and the better prepared we are, the better chance we have of being successful. So what are some of the challenges that we're going to face as we move into retirement? One of them is our own personal attitudes towards our money. A lot of us, when we get to retirement, automatically become concerned with the market and losing our money. And I would say that's a very good concern. I would also say, though, equally important is going to be the fact that we need to keep up with the marketplace. And what that means is that without proper growth of our portfolio, things that cost more 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, we may have trouble affording if we get too conservative in retirement. So this slide is primarily going to identify the fact that when we retire, unless we're independently wealthy, we still need to consider investing for growth because growth is where our raises are going to come from. And if I were to poll everyone on this call and ask you how many people think healthcare will be less expensive 20 years from now, I have a feeling very few, if any, hands would go up. So what this slide really focuses on, number one, is that we're going to need growth, and we're also going to need to protect our assets, and most importantly, we're going to know how much income we can take and when we can take it. And for all of us on this call, we're all going to have our own optimal mix of those 3 areas. So my takeaway from this slide is simply this. When we retire, we're not retiring on our assets. We're retiring on the income those assets can generate. And one of the things we need to focus on when it comes to income and retirement will be healthcare costs. And finding a perfect blend for each of you individually, and for myself included, of monitoring what happens in the market, but being available, being ready to be able to afford things in the marketplace is going to be critical. So we have to remember that we're investors before retirement and we're investors during retirement. So what are the challenges that we face when we're before retirement? Well, one is market loss. The other is prices going up. I don't know about you, but when I shop in the frozen food aisle and I'm buying ice cream, I'm usually buying a half a gallon of ice cream, but today the half a gallon, while it might still be $5.99 on sale, it really isn't a half a gallon anymore, is it? It's either 1.75 quarts or 1.5 quarts. So they're hiding inflation on us, and that's okay, we get it. But ultimately, when we retire and we're no longer relying on income from our earnings, now we're relying on income from our investments. When the market's down and prices are up, that becomes more challenging to us. And why in particular? Because we know we're concerned about outliving our assets. We want to make sure, if possible, that we provide for our surviving spouse. And importantly, today, based on this topic, that as healthcare costs are increasing, that we're able to afford those increases over time. So a good financial advisor will make sure that your portfolio is positioned in a way to help offset market loss, to help overcome inflation so that you do not outlive your assets, that you do provide for a surviving spouse, and that you have a plan to make sure your future health care costs are met along the way. So with those challenges as a background, what are some of the things we should be concerned about when it comes to health care? When it comes to health care, we know it's very complex. A quick little anecdote. My mom called me about 6 or 7 years ago and asked me next time I was in town on business to stop by and help her as she was trying to make a Medicare decision. I thought, what a great idea. I'll stop by, I'll grab my glasses and my highlighter, I'll run in, we'll sit down, have some dessert, and she can next morning call Medicare and make her decision. Well, a week later, I had my glasses on, my highlighter was in my hands, and I was home going through all the details. So I realized
may I please interrupt for 1 second?
Well. So I know a lot of people need help with this. We also know it's going to be one of our greatest expenses and one that will continue to grow. And we know it's one of your top concerns, which is why Nationwide has partnered with the actuarial firm to build out this presentation and this tool for all of you. Part of that dilemma is that we do know healthcare costs will grow greater than normal inflation. And so we need a tool that can factor in those higher healthcare costs. Over the past 10 years, healthcare inflation has grown actually more than double what regular inflation has grown at. And the other part of this as well is if we don't get healthcare right when it comes to the costs, we may wind up having to use dollars we set aside for something else in retirement on our healthcare. I ask all of you again rhetorically, what are some of the things you would like to do for yourself in retirement? And what are some of the things you would like to do for someone else? Do you aspire to put grandchildren through college? Do you give back to your alma mater? Do you give back to a place of worship? And the list goes on and on and on. If we don't get our health care costs right in our family, we may not have to borrow money from somebody else outside of our family, but we may have to borrow money from something else we would have liked to have done with those dollars. So tonight, our goal is to help you understand what those health care costs can be, help you prepare for those health care costs, so down the road you have an opportunity to enjoy doing something for yourself in retirement, but also doing it for others who are important to you.
Carlo, if I could jump in real quick, I just wanted to give a little reminder to the audience. If you're able to mute either your phone or headset, just helps with background static noise. My apologies, Carlo. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. And that was good timing. That was all in one breath, so I took a pause there. Okay. Actually, I took a little drink, as you can imagine. You need to wet your whistle when talking about some time here. So thank you for that. All right, everyone. So this next slide, as you take a look at this, let me draw an analogy back to what happened in the early 1970s that we're all experiencing today. Back in the 1970s, Congress passed a law in 1974, and we referred to it as ERISA. And ERISA opened the door for a number of things. In particular, it also opened the door for things like 401k plans and other types of retirement plans that would shift saving for retirement from the employers to us, the employees. And fewer of us retire today with pensions. And so we're responsible for saving along the way to meet our retirement needs. Well, it's happening all over again. Today, fewer and fewer employers are providing employees with health care benefits. And so health care for a lot of us will be Medicare. And as you can see here, as fewer and fewer people are retiring with medical benefits, the burden for planning for health care financially, again, is being shifted onto us. And again, that's why we have built this tool in this presentation to help all of you understand what it's going to take to meet that challenge along the way. Now, back to my first two questions. How much income do you think you're going to need in retirement? And what percentage do you think will go towards your health care costs? Let's look at the dollars. I get to play a little Steve Harvey here for those of you who like watching game shows on television. And the top 6 answers are on the board. As you can see here, we asked 625 respondents how much they thought health care would cost them, and this was January of 2012, on an annual basis for that first year in retirement. And as you can see, your 8% said about $10,000, about 13% said between $6,000 and under $10,000, and the majority of respondents guessed less than that. Now, the one thing you didn't know about this particular survey is that don't know was not one of the answers. So 26%, or the largest group of those who answered, actually chose not to even guess, even though one or more of these answers would have been right. And how would you have had to have guessed to have been right? As you can see here, somewhere north of $6,000. And that range is going to change depending, again, on where you live, your health history, and how much you earn. But you should expect, and this was already now 3 years ago, that your health care costs out of pocket would have been somewhere about $500 or more per month in 2012, with that number growing in time. And this does not include things like long-term care, but this does represent things like your Medicare premiums, anything Medicare doesn't cover out of pocket, as well as things like dental, vision, hearing, over-the-counter costs. So basically, everything you might expect to spend on health care except for long-term care, which Medicare does not cover. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But as you can see here, again, 4 out of 5 either underestimate or don't even choose to guess what health care costs are going to be. Now, we'll start working towards Medicare, and a couple of high-level points on Medicare. One is, while Medicare will cover most, if not all, of your medical needs if you purchase the right coverage, the one thing we have to understand is that for the average person, you're going to be responsible for about a third of your health care costs over the course of retirement when it comes to Medicare. Now, again, if you are able to utilize this resource, we'll get away from the averages and really try to hone in on what your costs are going to be. And the second thing, and I've already alluded to this, is that a lot of people believe Medicare covers long-term care, and I can tell you that it does not. And in a few slides, I'll break down for you the details on why people think it does. And even my mom and a lot of relatives thought it did. And unfortunately, people tend to find out it doesn't when it's too late, and that's when they need it. All right, this is the eye-opening slide. This slide in the lower left-hand corner is reflective of what someone should expect to spend on health care over the entire duration of their retirement years from when they are 65 and beyond. So as you can see here, it's north of $250,000 to over $350,000, again, for the average person. Now, those who live longer, those who have better health, those whose health isn't as good, those with shorter, your numbers can vary. But the idea here is that it's very meaningful. What you need to take away from this, though, is that you don't need that amount of money when you retire. The investments you have, the dollars you save, your 401ks, your IRAs, your non-qualified dollars, go back to the slide where I talked about we need to remain invested. However your advisor plans for you to remain invested in retirement, there are dollars you're spending and there are dollars that are invested. Some of those may be kept safe in cash and money market and CDs. Others might be in other products like fixed income bonds and things like that. Others might be in stocks and mutual funds and so on. Again, I won't talk about specific product tonight, but while those dollars are growing, your investments are growing, and that growth helps you to grow the dollars you need to spend more on health care when it becomes more expensive down the road. I also use that buying a house analogy. My mom and dad rented a house for a long time. And I remember when they finally got in position to be able to buy a house, and when they bought our first house back in the early 70s, if I remember right, it was under $100,000, but $100,000 as an example because it's a round number. Back then, with interest rates where they were, when my mom and dad were done paying for the house over 30 years, they didn't buy the house for $100,000. They bought a $100,000 house for about $300,000 because with the mortgage and interest, they paid about 3 times the purchase price for that house. Well, if that mortgage broker or whoever the banker was that was talking to my mom and dad about the house started with, well, this house is going to cost you $300,000, my mom would have kicked that person out of the house faster than you can imagine, because she would say there's no way we can afford $300,000 on a house, right? But how did my mom and dad buy the house? 1 month at a time. How do we pay for health care? 1 month at a time. If the roof goes, well, we have to find a way to make that work. If the hip goes, we have to find a way to make that work. And we usually do. We're pretty resilient. We find ways to make things work. So don't let this slide scare you. It can startle you. But just know we're going to try to help put you in a position to understand what your costs are. So when it comes to spending money on Medicare and health care, like this slide is showing us, as some of the examples will go, you'll be in position to be able to meet those challenges as well. So again, with that as a backdrop, the main part of the presentation now is let's talk about Medicare. What is Medicare? What does it cover? For those of you on the line, if you are career retired military, we thank you for your service. You don't see it on the slide now, but we know that TRICARE is part of your health care benefits in retirement. For the rest of us, typically, we'll be able to enroll in either option 1 or option 2, which will be original Medicare or Medicare Advantage plans. Our resource can accommodate both of these and TRICARE. So any of you on the call, if you have questions, when it comes to talking to the folks in Washington Retirement Planning Specialists, they can help all of you with this as well. So let me talk about option 2 just for a moment, and I'll spend the rest of my time on option 1 because that's the one that's more challenging when it comes to buying it and quantifying the costs. So option 2, Medicare Advantage plans, are exactly what the name says. They're Advantage plans, meaning that the advantages are if you enroll in Medicare A and B, when you do, if you choose the Advantage plan, you get prescription with it. And you don't have to buy a supplemental plan. In fact, it's illegal for someone to sell a supplemental plan to someone that owns an Advantage plan. You don't need it. Depending on the Advantage plan you purchase, whether it comes with a higher deductible or higher copays, it's really up to you to figure out which plan makes the most sense for you. And the other nice thing about Advantage plans is that they manage costs by asking you to stay in the network. So if you buy an Advantage plan, you'll need to use the doctors and the specialists that are part of that particular plan. And if you do, typically your costs would be less than if you go out of the network, but also if you were to buy the original Medicare. The downside is if you travel a lot, go out of the area, go out of the country, while you'll always have catastrophic coverage with Medicare, whichever one you buy, anytime you go out of network, your Advantage plan won't provide you coverage as well as if you would have purchased original Medicare. So Medicare Advantage plans are really ideal for those who like staying in the network, who don't travel as much, who routinely will be okay with seeing the doctor or the specialist that's available on a given day. But for those of you who are willing to spend a little more to see the doctor you want to see, the doctors who accept Medicare, who want to purchase the prescription plans, the supplemental plans that make more sense to you, that's where original Medicare comes in. So original Medicare breaks down like this. Part A is hospital. It covers things like inpatient, skilled facilities, home health care, and last days of care in hospice. The reason most people confuse Medicare and long-term care is the fact that Medicare will cover up to 100 days in a skilled facility or in your home after you've been hospitalized and admitted for 3 days or longer. So I have a family member who had a heart attack, was in the hospital for 2 weeks, then went to a skilled facility, was there for about 3 weeks, then went home, had someone care for her in her home. Medicare covered a lot of those costs the first 20 days at 100%, and the next 80 days, if there were 80 days, in this case there weren't, but at 80%. And that person thought because they went to a facility that was a long-term care facility, and all their friends talked about how nice Medicare covers long-term care. But that's not how it works. See, the facility she went to does offer long-term care, or AKA, or also known as custodial care, but it also offers skilled care. And the difference is simply skilled care says you have a short-term condition, It's temporary, and you should be able to make progress from it and recover. That's what Medicare pays up to 100 days for. The other side of the coin, or the opposite of that, is custodial care, which says this is long-term, it could be lifelong, and you're not going to be able to recover. Short-term is acute, long-term is chronic. And here's another example. Two people have strokes. They both go to the same facility. One is in a skilled facility, a skilled wing in the facility, and the other is in custodial care in the facility. One, the doctor says, you know what, you've had a bad stroke, but with physical therapy, you should be able to recover and regain use of your arm, your leg, maybe with speech therapy, you should have growth there, and so on and so on. For the other person, the doctor said, the bad news is you had a very bad stroke. The good news is you survived it. However, you're going to need to learn to live with whatever that condition is. Medicare will pay for the short-term, acute, making progress up to 100 days. It will not pay for the long-term, chronic, lifelong. You're going to have to learn to live with this. And that's why it's important to understand, because a lot of people think Medicare will cover it, and when they find out it doesn't is when they needed it. And long-term care can be very expensive, but that's a topic and a conversation for another day. Tonight, I just want you to walk away knowing that Medicare does not cover long-term care, and now you can explain it to someone else as well. So what does Part A cost? Well, we're all paying for that right now if we're working. And as long as we've worked 40 quarters and paid into Medicare, once we turn age 65, we can enroll in Part A. If we never go to the hospital, we would never have a deductible or a copay. But as you can see the schedule here, if we are hospitalized, we have a deductible of $1,260, and anybody who's been to the hospital knows that goes pretty quickly. After that, and after you're hospitalized for an extended stay, the copays can add up very, very quickly. The longer you're in the hospital, the more you would incur. That's the bad news. The good news is if you buy a supplemental plan, it covers things like deductibles and copays. So naturally, I will talk about supplemental plans in a few moments. So Part A is hospital, and remember, it does not cover long-term care. Part B is medical. As you can see in the bullet points, everything from going to a doctor to preventative benefits to medical equipment and outpatient services. This is where it becomes needs-based, and this is where our tool can really begin to focus in on you individually or as a couple. Part B premiums are based on our modified adjusted gross income. There is a smaller deductible, $147, and there's a 20% copay where Medicare will pick up 80% after we meet our deductible. Here's the schedule of what it would cost per person per month for your Part B based on how much you earn. Now, this says 2013 because think about it. If you owed Uncle Sam $2,000 in January of 2015, you may have completed your taxes in February or March, but you're probably not mailing your return in and your check in until April. Well, if you enrolled in Medicare in 2015, Medicare, the IRS did not have your 2014 taxes, so they would have looked back at 2013 for your earnings, and your premium would have been based on 2013 earnings, even though you've retired and enrolled in Medicare in 2015. So this slide is correct. It's just indicative of the fact that when you do enroll in Medicare, there is a catch-up or a look-back that says your premium is based on your income based on the last record that the IRS has for you. So your premium could be higher or lower your first year in retirement than what it would have been had you had it based on your current earnings. So this tells us that for the individuals filing, if you earn modified adjusted gross income of $85,000 or less, your premium is $104.90 a month. If you're a couple and you're married filing joint and it's $170 or less, each of you will pay $104.90 per month. And as you can see, as the income escalates, so does the amount each of you would pay. Now, just a quick heads up that if you are a couple and you enroll in Medicare individually, you can enroll in any plan you want, you don't both have to enroll in the same plan. And unlike when you were working, you were covered potentially by a spouse's plan. When it comes to Medicare, you do have to enroll in your own plan. And so these premiums then will be based on how you file, and this is per person per month. So if you're in the first category of $104.90 and you're a married couple, that times 2 people times 12 months times 15, 20 years in retirement is less that you'll need to set aside than maybe somebody in the fourth category where it's $270 a month times 2 people times 12 months times 15, 20 years. And that's why this tool becomes very useful, because we get away from the averages and we zero in on what is it that you need to set aside today or over the next 5, 10, 15 years to meet your specific costs along the way. Excuse me for a moment. Okay, so we talked about Part C originally, which were the Advantage plans. We covered A and B, which are hospital and medical. That leaves 2 more. The first one is Part D. Part D would be our prescription plan. And if we're purchasing original Medicare, when it comes time to buy our prescription plan, we have a lot of choices. We could buy very cheap plans that are very inexpensive, or we could buy very expensive plans when it comes to premiums. But the real cost of your prescription plan isn't just relegated to the cost of the premium. The real cost in a prescription plan comes with what does it cover or what does it not cover. Because a very inexpensive premium plan that doesn't cover most of your medications could be a very expensive out-of-pocket plan. The nice thing is today you can talk to most pharmacists and most drugstores, and they'll help you understand which plans are available in your area, and they'll be able to look at the medications that you're taking and help you compare it to the formularies available on the different plans. So making a prescription decision has probably never been easier than it is today. The other thing to remember is that your formulary may change, the medications you're taking may change over the course of the year, and like the rest of Medicare, when it comes to supplemental plans and it comes to prescription plans, you do have flexibility in the plans you can choose. With your prescription plan, you can always make a change into a plan that makes more sense for you later in the year, and as you can see in this case from October 15th to December 7th, for coverage that will begin on January of the following year. And the last thing on prescription, and I'm going to build this up here for you, is that currently prescription comes with this ugly thing called the donut hole, which simply means once we met our deductible, now we're making our copays of 25% and our prescription plan is picking up 75%. After we've reached $2,960 in total drug costs, we're now responsible for 100% of our prescription costs up to $7,062 in total drug costs, which means $4,700 has come out of our pocket. Now, the good news is that's going away. The Affordable Care Act will phase that out by 2020. But between now and then, we'll need to know what those drug costs can be so we can budget for them. And so we continue to build this into our tool until 2020 when that changes, and then we'll reflect that for you as well. The better news as well for those who are in a difficult situation is that there is catastrophic coverage, and prescription plans will provide 95% coverage once you move out of the donut hole. I know people with $10, $15, $20, $30, $40,000 of prescription costs, serious illnesses, and that catastrophic coverage certainly makes a big difference for them. And again, good news is it's there. The bad news, though, is that starts over every year, and you have to work your way back up through the deductibles, copays, and so on. Okay, we have our A, our B, our D. We talked about C, which is separate. Now we have supplemental plans. Supplemental plans or Medigap plans are exactly what they sound like. They supplement your coverage. They fill the gaps for what your A and your B don't cover. So your hospital, your medical, deductibles, and copays, supplemental plans pick up a lot of those costs. Look at the last bullet point there. It does not pick up what I just covered, and I'll go back there for a moment. It doesn't pick up any of those costs on this slide that you're responsible for, but it does pick up the A and B deductibles and copays. Once you enroll in Medicare, and we'll talk about that in a few moments, and you enroll in Part B, you've got a 6-month window to buy your supplemental plan from the day you enroll in Part B, which I'll cover enrollment in a few minutes. The nice thing about this is if you do enroll in that first 6 months, you're guaranteed insurability. No pre-existing conditions can be held against you. Just like with the Affordable Care Act, if you enroll in Medicare in the supplemental plan when you're first eligible, you cannot be denied or rated. And so you need to understand that that's critical. In a few moments, I'll walk you through the enrollment process and timeline for Medicare. Now, just a little back to my game show host here. I'm going to put the top answers on the board again for you. And now this is the cost of Medicare for the average person in the United States, but it's only for premiums out of pocket. Meaning, just like when you drive your car, if you never have an accident, you pay for coverage but you never use it, you put your insurance card in your glove box. This slide is putting your Medicare card in your purse or in your wallet. So if you remember earlier, I said if you've worked 40 quarters and paid into Medicare, when you turn 65, you can enroll in Part A and you've prepaid your premium. If that's the case, there's no premium for Part A once you enroll in it. And by the way, if you are married to someone who has, but you haven't worked long enough, if your spouse is eligible when you marry, you are also eligible to enroll in Medicare with no premium for Part A. Now remember, Part B is means-based. The average American individual earns $85,000 or less in retirement or $170,000 or less in retirement. Of course, if your earnings are higher, your Part B premium would be higher on this slide. Part D, prescription, the average cost in the U.S. is about $37, $38 a month. I've seen it as low as $15, as high as $160. Again, depends on the plan that you buy for the best coverage. How about those Medigap plans or supplemental plans, not Part C, which were the Advantage plans, but the Medigap plans which fill the gap. The average for Plan C in the U.S. is about $186. As you can see here, for an individual today, if you're 65, not counting your out-of-pocket costs, which were about $500 a person or more, for you individually, it's about $330 a month. For you as a couple, about $650, $660, or almost $7,800, $7,900 just to put your card in your wallet, which again is an eye-opener for a lot of folks, which is why we built this presentation and built this tool to better help you see what you can do to prepare for that. And again, a reminder on Medicare Part C, the Advantage plans. I've covered this already, so I'm going to move beyond this slide now and start talking about enrollment, and then wrap up with the tool and then answer any questions you might have along the way. All right, so if you're already enrolled in Social Security or you have a railroad pension prior to age 65, you will automatically be enrolled in Medicare. However, for those who are not, everybody should enroll in Medicare Part A, your hospitalization, when you turn 65, whether you're covered by health care or not. There's really no reason not to do it. Even if you're covered by a plan at work or if you're covered by a spouse's plan. The fact of the matter is you prepaid for that premium, and if you're covered by another plan, if you go to the hospital on that plan and that plan doesn't cover everything, and you're 65 or older and you've enrolled in your Medicare Part A, you can submit those costs to Medicare to see what they'll cover. Because if you work for an employer of 20 employees or greater, that would be the norm. For those who on this call, if you happen to work for an employer of 20 or fewer, then your employer will make Medicare primary, and if they still provide a health care plan, that would be secondary. But for most people working for, I should say 21 or larger, your health care through work or your spouse's work would be primary and Medicare would be secondary. So here's how this works. 3 months prior to your 65th birthday, you can apply for Medicare Part A. If you do that in enough advance, you'll have coverage in the birth month of your 65th birthday. You can wait as long as 3 months after your birthday or birth month, but if you don't apply in that window, you'll have to wait for the next year and the open enrollment period the following year. Obviously, there really is no reason not to enroll in Medicare Part A, so the best advice I've ever heard somebody give is 3 months prior to your 65th birthday, put in your application for Part A. Otherwise, you've got that 7-month window of 3 months before, 1 month of, that's 4, and 3 months after, that's your 7-month window. Now, here's where you have to really understand this. Once you've enrolled in Medicare Part A, if you're not covered by another plan, a creditable plan, you have 8 months to enroll in your Part B. Part B being your medical. If you don't, every year you wait will come with a premium penalty. So again, it's important to remember a 7-month window for A. Then once you enroll in A, if you're not covered by a plan elsewhere, you have an 8-month window to enroll in B. And now, if you remember, I told you your supplemental plan, which guarantees your insurability, once you enroll in Part B, you now have 6 months to enroll in that. So remember, A is 7, B is 8, and once you're enrolled in B, you have 6 months to enroll in your supplemental plan. But you might be thinking, Carlo, I'm 65, I've enrolled in Part A, but I'm covered by my spouse's plan. Do I need to do that? And typically the answer is no, but always check with your benefits coordinator. But what will happen is the day your spouse no longer has that coverage, or you no longer have that coverage, the 8-month clock starts. Meaning, again, you got your A, but now you're not covered. You have 8 months to enroll in your Part B, and from that date you've enrolled in your Part B, you have 6 months to enroll in your supplemental plan. And I know it's a lot to remember, but I just want to make sure you understand that when it comes time to enroll in Medicare, the more people you can talk to about it, the more information you can have, the better off you're going to be. And 2 places you can get really good information on this will be Medicare.gov, which is an outstanding website. I'm on it every week, if not daily. It's very intuitive. Has a great search engine on it. My mom is on it regularly now, and she just celebrated a very big birthday just yesterday, and I've got her internet savvy. So she did not like the internet 4 or 5 years ago, and today you think she was born with it at her thumbs. All right, so you have Medicare.gov. Each state also has a state health insurance assistance program. So wherever you're calling in from, if you were to go online and look up your Department of Aging, which I hate the name of that, by the way, and you call and ask at the toll-free number for help with questions on Medicare, they can direct you to someone who is not going to sell you anything. They're going to answer your questions and help you better understand the timing of your decisions and so on and so on. Okay, so I'm about 40 minutes into the call. Let me wrap it up with the last piece here and show you what Nationwide has created to help you understand your specific health care costs and take the guesswork out of how much I need to set aside for health care in the future. I mentioned here again that we're going to base it on the 3 areas, which include where you live. We're going to base it on how much you earn and also your health history. The slides here that I'm showing you are a sample report that will break down, as you can see here, this couple who's 60, they're going to retire at 65. We provide them with life expectancy based on the health history below. This couple lives in Ohio. They've given us their income level, and they gave us an idea of whether or not they need to purchase insurance. For example, are they retiring before 65? And if they answer yes, then we can show them the cost of private insurance through the Medicare exchanges in their state. So it's a very comprehensive tool. He said yes, he has type 2 diabetes. So as you go back up to the top, you can see men generally, we're going to predecease our spouses, generally speaking. In this case, his medical condition would cause that to happen even a little bit earlier. From there, remember the slide when I talked about the need for growth of income in retirement? This bar chart is reflective of this couple, John and Jane, turning on their Medicare in 2020, and you can see what it costs for the two of them side by side. You just add those up, and it was about almost $10,000, a little over $10,000 for them. He passed away in 2035, and as you can see, for her alone, the following year, her cost was just under $15,000. And as it goes out even farther into the future, her costs alone are greater than their costs together. And that's why it's always important to be concerned about the market, but you also have to be equally concerned about maintaining purchasing power in the marketplace. I'm going to just quickly skip by the bottom part. If you were to run one of the assessments, you would receive your own copy of this with your data. This is just 5-year averages for healthcare costs. A good financial advisor may want to talk to you about things like structuring your investments in different ways to meet different costs different times. That's what this piece of the slide can do for them as well. And your hosts who brought me on the call can certainly talk to you about that as well. Then we give you a year-by-year, line-by-line analysis projecting your healthcare costs based on your answers. And it's not easy to go through this in detail on the call, but I will just ask you, just read across the very top to identify what the columns are, and then as you read down the side, the right-hand column, you'll see what the potential costs are. And I'll just remind everybody that healthcare costs will change because the assumptions that we make may change. Your health may improve over time. It may take a turn for the worse over time. Healthcare costs may go up or may go down. The bottom line is a financial plan is always good the day you make it, and it's even better if you make adjustments to it when it's time to make those adjustments along the way. Like every good financial plan, monitoring it for changes always makes sense. And so this tool is just as good as any plan as long as you monitor it and you continue to update along the way as you need to. The bottom line for this couple in the lower right-hand corner tells us that they would, over their lifetime, if you include what comes out of their Social Security for their Medicare, they would have spent about $490,000 on their health care. That assumes they live to their life expectancy no longer, no shorter. Knowing your life expectancy, knowing your health, knowing your family history is important for any financial advisor to anticipate what your life expectancy might be, and you can override that on this report if you wanted to. So this is not $250,000 or $350,000. This is almost $500,000 for this couple. The difference between them and the earlier number is that this couple was only 60 years old, and this is them going into the future 5 years and inflation on their health care versus the other example that we looked at, assuming somebody's 65 today. I mentioned Social Security. I don't know how many of you know this, but once you're enrolled in Social Security and Medicare, your Part B premiums for your Medicare come out of your Social Security benefit. So the folks at Washington Retirement Planning Specialists know that if you're going to set aside money for health care, but some of it's already coming out of your Social Security, you would need to be able to look at the column that reflects the net amount that does not include what's already come out of your Social Security. So the column on the right, which said $352,000, is about $138,000 less than the column of $490, which says if you're going to spend money from your investable assets on health care, then if you were this couple over the entire course of your retirement, that's about $352,000. Finally, the bottom two boxes are the averages. So this couple would have spent on average about $13,500 a year on their health care. But remember, I'll go back to the top. The first year was about $7,400, and then their health care costs escalated over time until he passed away when it peaked at about $21,000. And then from there, after he passed away, it dropped, but her health care costs trickled up over time as well. Once you've got your own numbers, it'll be a lot easier to figure out what your financial plan will look like. And what our tool can also do, in addition to Medicare, is also provide you with projections for long-term care, either where you live or where you believe you're going to retire and need long-term care. And we, again, can customize these for you based on that plus where you may very well receive that health care, whether it's at home or in a facility. Finally, there's a fact finder on the screen now, which will be made available to you afterwards as follow-up, that your financial advisor will complete up top to tell us about them. And if you're interested in generating a report to see what your health care costs may be in retirement, so you know how much to set aside for your retirement savings to meet that, the first area would be tell us about you and where you live, because health care costs, as you know now, vary by state. The next part would be tell us very simply, yes or no, about your current state of health. Finally, we'd ask you to tell us about what you project earning in retirement, because Medicare is means-based. At the bottom of the page, you would tell us of all of the Medicare costs, which ones would you like us to put on that report? The box that says at the very bottom, include Medicare Parts A and B, that would be for someone retiring that has TRICARE, which already provides supplemental and prescription. We don't need to show supplemental prescription, only show A and B in order to stay for that. The top box impacts most people who are going to retire and enroll in Medicare and will need to see all the costs. The other two in between would be for special situations. But once you fill this out and return it back to your financial advisor, within 1 to 3 days, they would have your report back with your real numbers to provide you with an idea then of going forward how to plan for your health care costs. So that being said, we talked about a lot of things. We talked about the challenge on the front end, including things like most people don't know the costs. Most people underestimate what it covers, or what it costs, and overestimate what it covers. And your takeaway there is Medicare does not cover long-term care. We talked about Medicare and in many different parts along the way, when to enroll. And we also talked about the fact that while we have averages, and averages are okay for everybody, we need specifics for individuals. And now nationwide, as a leading provider in the retirement plan market, this is a very unique tool that we've brought to the marketplace to help you get your hands around what your specific costs may very well be. So with that, I've concluded my comments. I will pass the baton back, and I will see if we're going to take any questions here.
Thank you very much, Carlo. Planning for healthcare certainly can be a challenge, and your insight tonight was very beneficial in helping to break down some of the key aspects that go into it. So thank you. With that, like Carlo said, we would be happy to open the floor to our clients for any questions for Carlo. So at this time, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask over the phone or also via the chat message on webinar, and we can relay those questions to Carlo.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can.
This is Howard Sunke. How are you? So, Carlo, what I didn't hear, and which has really been the dilemma that I have never figured out, I've been retired, is when you have, you talked about TRICARE, but you didn't talk about the Federal Employees Health Benefits Program, which most of us who are in foreign service or civil service retire with. When I retired, the mantra was, don't ever give up your federal government health care. It essentially is hospitalization, although it's apparently Medicare Part A, which you don't pay for, sort of preempts it.
Right.
It's equivalent to Part B, and it's better, much better drug care, prescription drug coverage than you get under Medicare. So what I wind up paying is something on the order of $5,500 a year in premiums. Last year we had maybe $4,000 or $5,000 in out-of-pocket costs, and I don't have either Part B or Part D in Medicare. And it's never been clear to me. Some people have said keep your federal employees plan and buy Part B from Medicare because it will pick up your other costs. Other people have said, drop your government coverage and go into Medicare and get a Medigap plan to pick up the out-of-pocket differences. And the relationship between Medicare and the federal government, the federal employees health benefits program, just eludes me. I don't understand it, and I wonder.
I do. First of all, thank you for your commentary and your experience. Living in Virginia and covering the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, I do get to hear this a lot. There is no coordination and no simple way to really even if you had a spreadsheet, what are the advantages? Because some of them are qualitative and some quantitative. As you've alluded to already, you've got outstanding prescription coverage. And so to keep that, you'd have to keep the plan. But the dilemma is then you have some meaningful out-of-pocket costs that if you had a Part B, may very well have picked up those costs. And so short of being able to give you specific advice, I do know that you're not precluded from enrolling in Part B. And so one strategy I've heard others talk about is they've kept their federal employee health care plan, but they've also enrolled in the Part B, and that's helped them with their out-of-pocket costs. The challenge there is, and typically early on, maybe the challenge is greater than later. The challenge is for a lot of people, they tend to have greater use of their health care later in life unless they are living with a condition and so on and so on. But along the way, having that Part B to make up for some of those costs later on definitely makes for a very positive financial impact. So there is no simple silver bullet answer to the dilemma, which is why I know, and I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill. We were with a bunch of staffers and legislative aides and a bunch of folks about a month or so ago. There's a strong appetite for an overhaul of all of healthcare, federal level down, to try to coordinate things. Because even today, with prescription, there's no help for prescription, and they've addressed that through the Affordable Care Act. But again, it's piecemeal, and there are a lot of folks like yourself who put a lot of years in with the federal government where what is a very good benefit is better in some ways than Medicare, but not as good in others. And so to be able to come up with a way to address that and address an overhaul of healthcare would be one of the ways to make that happen, although nobody anticipates something on that scale happening anytime soon. So, but I appreciate your comment, and thank you for that. Other questions?
Yes, hi. I have a question. And you said you were not going to go into long-term care, a discussion of long-term care, but that's something that I've been considering or thinking about, because the older you get, if you don't buy into it, it's more costly.
I'm wondering about how I might find. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm wondering how do I get some concrete information so I can make a sound decision.
Sure, and I think that's where the host on our call today can help you with that. I can tell you at a high level, the long-term care market has changed significantly over time, and even more recently, there's more flexibility in terms of the types of products available today, from traditional long-term care to hybrid products, and some of the major differences in traditional long-term care, where you bought the product, and if you didn't have a long-term care need, you didn't use it. Today that's being addressed with products that say if you buy a product, whether you use it during your lifetime or if you don't, if you pass away, there's a death benefit available to your heirs. It addresses some of those other concerns. So I would defer, again, to the host of the call. They'll tell you that you're exactly right. Long-term care is a critical concern. Secondly, the longer you wait to buy it, the more expensive it is. And thirdly, as I said before, if somebody waits to buy it when they need it, they're not going to be able to get it because they wouldn't qualify for it. So buying long-term care when you're insurable and when it's less costly is always a good approach to buying long-term care.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I appreciate your previous answer. I had the same concern as the previous person because I'm a retiree from the federal government, and I've been dealing with the issue of whether or not to go into Part B because I have federal employees' health insurance. So it is an issue for us. And I like the federal employees' health insurance as a retired
and
foreign
I appreciate you sharing
officer.
that. We do hear it a lot. Thank you. I see we're a couple minutes before the top of the hour. Do you have time for the question?
We absolutely do. If there's anybody else that has any further questions, please feel free at this time.
Well, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for taking time to spend an hour on the phone with us tonight and to allow me on behalf of Nationwide to share with you hopefully some helpful background information, but also to let you know that we do have a resource available that can help you begin to plan for your retirement in a way that will allow you to do the types of things that you would like to do for yourself and for others. So with that, again, I will say thank you very much to all of you and to our host for having me on. And again, I will hand the baton back to you to close the call.
Thank you very much, Carlo. And it looks like we did have one final question come in. Mr. Plater, thank you very much. The question is, Carlo, can you keep your TRICARE for life along with Medicare?
Yes, the two would be coordinated, and ultimately at 65 you'll have to make that decision to enroll in your A and B. But again, that's the type of thing where when you contact Medicare or Medicare.gov or call them, they'll be able to help you understand what the timing of everything is.
Okay, thank you, Carlo. We'll just give it another minute or so here. If anyone comes in with any last-minute questions, and then we'll close out from there.
This is Mike Permenter. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can, Mr. Permenter.
This isn't a question. This is just kind of an observation because I just went through the exercise of signing up for Medicare A and B. And it was kind of a painful experience because I started out first with Social Security. And I think that's who you have to submit your application to. And then I had to work with the Medicare office as well. And I had some problems with as far as mailing information and mailing addresses. And so I had to work with two different entities. And, of course, they always tell you there that they're computerized, but unfortunately, they're probably 5 to 6 weeks apart. In other words, if you update it in one area, update some information like personal information, address, or change of address, it may be 5 or 6 weeks before it's picked up in the other side. Social Security, Medicare side. And the same way with as far as having being billed for Medicare Part B, there you can you get a bill from one entity there, but then it's paid to another entity. So it can be kind of confusing. The other thing that I might share, earlier this afternoon there was a federal teleconference there about health care and long-term care. And, the advice that they offered was that a person would be very unwise probably to drop their medical insurance, their federal employee health benefits, because they reminded the participants on the web conference that the Medicare is really just a supplement. And their recommendation was to keep the federal health plan, and then you have to weigh whether it's to your advantage to get the Medicare Part B, because as a federal retiree, your Part A, as I understand it, is free. There's no cost for that. But then the option becomes the Part B in there, and they explain that there are some options. There's some other health plans that you can get. I guess the one advice that they left is for the new sign-up in 2015 to look at, I think they referred to it as Part 9 of the different plan brochures, because apparently OPM is encouraging a lot of these companies to offer some type of a, let me get my notes, comparison. Hold on a second. Let me get my notes here. But in other words,
we're not on the phone, we're on the computer.
yeah.
If you wanted to chat.
Yeah, no, that's technical.
Yeah, they were saying that offer the best coordination with your federal health plan and with Medicare. Apparently that's going to be another something to look at in the future.
Put the camera
That's all I really wanted to share.
All very good comments, and it's not uncommon that someone has had that kind of experience in terms of timing differences between the various agencies. One of my points early on, if you remember, was you have a 7-month window to initially enroll in your Part A, and you can do it as early, apply as early as 3 months before. And part of the reason why I encourage people to apply as early as they can is to get that ball rolling as soon as possible, so things can catch up in time to have what you need. You made a couple of other points as well. If you recall, there was a question earlier where someone talked about your current benefits, the federal benefits with Medicare, and the question came up on, they talked about some of the out-of-pocket costs and so on. And what I shared was, I think a lot of what you said came out of the call today as well, and that was when you go back and look at the actual out-of-pocket costs, you may be better off paying for Part B, but, and I didn't say it to this extent, but the idea was on the quantitative side, buying Part B could be helpful to you in that what you'll save will be more than the premium you're paying. But on the qualitative side, if you were to give up your federal benefits, clearly you'd be moving to a lesser prescription plan. And so it's really hard to say there's a right way for everybody. But for most people, where prescription is important, if you want to minimize your out-of-pocket costs, then you keep the plan and add Part B to that, which I think is a lot of what you shared there as well. So I'm glad to hear they're talking about that as well.
Thank you, Carlo, and thank you, Mr. Permenter, as well. Mr. Plater, I saw your question, how do I access the nationwide healthcare estimate tool? Carlo has made this available to me, which I will make available to all of our clients as well. And from there, essentially filling out the tool, the application at that point, and I will communicate that with Carlo accordingly. We'll leave the floor open again if there's any other questions. Okay, well, with that, I will go ahead and we'll conclude the webinar presentation for tonight. Carlo, thank you again. Everything was very insightful, so thank you very much for that. And thank you for everyone for joining and your participation tonight. Other than that, we all wish you a wonderful night, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.